was a one-man attack this weekend, early Sunday morning about 4 a.m., on an ICE detention center in Tacoma, Washington. And I will play a short clip here from Matt Christensen that is a good explanation of what happened, probably a far better explanation than I can give. But the reason I'm doing this is that I believe that 90% of the U.S. population either doesn't have time to look at current events and do it in a more expansive way than just with the mainstream media. They either don't have time, they don't care, or to be efficient, they just watch mainstream media. And when you see how this was covered, this story, what led up to it, and what is going on, I just feel it's important to perhaps be able to give someone or someone's a compressed version of this so they can see the facts and understand how really significant events like this don't get a lot of media coverage and kind of fade off the radar screen very, very quickly. And this has to do with Antifa. This has to do with violence. This has to do with not being willing to call violence for what it is. So take a look at this clip, and then I'll be back with further explanation.
There was a domestic terrorist attack over the weekend, and if I lived in a prior decade, I might not have heard a single word about it. If my only sources of information were newspaper or broadcast TV, I wouldn't even be discussing this story. But thanks to the evil right-wing internet conspiracy theorist extremists we otherwise call the alternative media, we actually do know a lot about what would be a major national story in any sane world. But just in case you're not caught up, here's a quick rundown of the facts. Early Saturday morning, Willem Van Spronsen, a man with a prior history of physical aggression toward police officers, approached the Northwest Detention Center in Tacoma, Washington. That's an Immigration and Customs Enforcement holding facility. He was armed with his own illegal serial-free AR build, encouraging others to disregard the law and build the same sort of weapons, but we're not going to talk about banning them this time because that carries no political benefit in this case, as well as incendiary devices, reported as Molotov cocktails. He threw the explosives at vehicles and buildings, setting one car on fire, and unsuccessfully attempted to ignite a propane tank. Officers responded, reporting shots fired. It's not currently clear if police fired first or if Van Spronsen fired at them first, if at all. In all, 4 officers responded. None of them were injured. Van Spronsen was dead at the scene from multiple gunshot wounds. A longtime friend of Van Spronsen says she believes this was intentional suicide by cop, an effort to become a martyr for his political beliefs. And it appears that's the case, since Van Spronsen sent letters to his friends saying as much, and since he also wrote a manifesto condemning what he views as a fascist state and its detention centers. He claimed to act as an individual and not on behalf of any group, but he also wrote, quote, "I am Antifa," and his area comrades were immediately out praising him, protesting the police, and saying his efforts were only a start of what is needed, and that they wish he had razed the entire facility to the ground.
To really understand what's happening here, we have to take a look at the events that led up to this and just how active Antifa is in the Pacific Northwest. So if we go back to last year, there is a photojournalist by the name of Andy No. And Andy has been filming hoaxes, race-baiting hoaxes and things like that. He's been filming Antifa violence in Portland. He lives in Portland. And recently he filmed an event, an Antifa event protest, and he was beaten savagely. He ended up with a brain hemorrhage. Hopefully he'll be okay. But here's a clip of what happened to Andy. Certainly no one deserves to be treated like that and have the people get away with it scot-free. And I will tell you, there'll be some more video that you'll see here that was much more violent than that one. Now I'd like to play a clip of an interview with Jack Persobic. Jack is the host, or one of the hosts on One American News, and he has done a lot of research on Antifa. He comes from the military and/or intelligence community. He's done a lot of research on Antifa. I believe he's infiltrated an Antifa, like band, local band or group. I don't want to necessarily call them a cell, but that may be what it is. And he has some real insight into their tactics and how they work. So take a look at this, especially in context of what you just saw.
So speaking of Andy No, you've seen the video of his recent assault by Antifa.
Yes.
The reason why we're having this interview right now. It looks very chaotic, but I think you've been documenting that some of this stuff is extremely systematized, and there's different types of people that are involved in guiding the way the violence works and so forth. Can you explain a little bit what you saw in the video?
To kind of break down, if you watch what happens in the Andy No video, and you can watch this from multiple angles. I had the opportunity to speak to Andy, sort of over text while he was in the hospital, and you can understand what was done to him was a strategy, right? This was a tactic that was used against him. If you're watching the video, you might think, oh, this is just chaos. Everything's happening so quickly. There's no actual, rhyme or reason to it. It's just people going crazy. But actually look at what happens and document what happens, right? They sort of pop out with masks, with the black bloc, everyone's in black, everyone's covered. Those people then begin to strike him. They strike him in the head specifically. They're going for the head. They're going to create head injuries. Then those people slink back into the black bloc. You can't find them, you can't track them because of their outfits, right? This is a tactic. This is something that has been predetermined. This idea of, sort of incapacitate your opponent's ability to see, incapacitate them in order their ability to reason, shock them, then go in, create the attacks, go for head attacks, which they know could create lasting damage. We know that this created brain bleeding. Hopefully, I pray to God that everything is okay, but that could cause lasting damage,
of course,
to Andy or to anyone that they target with these tactics.
Let's now tie together Andy's work as a videographer and a video that he took late last year, where in the video highlighted is the man who attacked the ICE facility in Tacoma this past weekend.
Fascists go home! 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 Fascists go home!
That was video from an Antifa protest in Portland late last year. Now, if you watch that guy, it's obviously he has an earbud in his ear, and he's listening to someone, even to the point where he covers his ear because he can't hear, probably because of the crowd. He is, without a doubt, a leader, or was a leader, or at least a high-ranking, let's call him, officer at Antifa. And it's pretty clear that while these events, these protests look disorganized and they look chaotic, that they are planned. There is, for lack of a better expression, a battle plan. And Jack Persobic will explain that here in this next clip.
What Antifa does is they organize their black blocs in three levels, right? The three levels are green, yellow, and red, and it's like a pyramid. Green is the biggest, then yellow, then red. And what do I mean by that? So green level of the black bloc is, those are just sort of your hangers-on. Those are your people that'll maybe show up, hold up a sign, chant the chant. They're not there to really get their hands dirty. But what they serve is a very essential purpose for the people who do want to get their hands dirty
Kind of a cover.
and do want to commit this, right? So they create a cover in terms of like, think of like a school of fish, right? Can you point out one tuna in any school of tuna, right? You can't. They all look exactly the same, and that's the idea. So within that black block, you've got the greens. The yellows, then, your middle block, those are your organizers. Those are the ones kind of deciding the next move. They're deciding what's going to happen next. They're deciding when to strike. They're deciding who's going to strike. And then you get to your reds. And your reds are the smallest group, but those are also going to be your most violent. So they are going to commit violence. They're going to commit destruction of property. They're going to do what Antifa refers to as direct action. And these will be separated. So in Antifa planning meetings, which I've sat in on, I've actually infiltrated Antifa groups and sat in on their planning meetings, and they'll even separate the greens and the reds in terms of the circles at the meeting. So they'll have a private meeting with the greens and then another private meeting with the reds. So the greens have a sense that there might be something going on called direct action, but it doesn't involve them. And they're told to be quiet, don't talk to media, don't talk to reporters. Whereas the Reds will be told, okay, this is what we're going to do, this is who we're going to hit, this is when it's going to happen. You throw the milkshake first, you throw the, if you have a brick, if you have a weapon, you aim for the head. That's what the Reds are all told. You smash, this property is going to get it, we're going to break this window if we have the opportunity. And then they go through their sort of, they have sort of calls that they'll go out for. One of them is alerta. So alerta is everyone gets quiet and then listens to the leader. Then the leader explains what's going to happen next. Or they'll do mic check. Mic check, everyone stops talking and you're about to hear instructions. So once they learn these different calls, these different behaviors, and I've tracked this across the United States. I've gone over to Europe. I've seen these same calls being used even in Europe. So
really?
We know that there's essentially TTP transfer. So when I was in the intelligence community, we would see what's called TTP transfer. That's tactics, techniques, and procedures that are then shared throughout multiple groups. The most famous one or infamous one of all time is that IRA. So the IRA bombings that would go on in the 70s, we would then see those same bombing tactics used by the Palestinian Liberation Organization, so the PLO. And so a lot of people would kind of look at that and say, well, wait, what are Irish people doing helping the Palestinian terrorists, right? It doesn't, there's no connection. Sure, but there's a tactical connection. And so you'll see this TTP transfer to multiple groups in terms of one group will see something that becomes effective, and then the other group will adopt it. This has only been fueled by the rise of social media because social media makes it easy. You don't even need to call people anymore. You can just watch on social media, see what's happening. And so milkshaking was an example of this tactic, which is something that originated in Britain. It originated in the United Kingdom. Nigel Farage was milkshaked, right? We saw tweets from even some companies, fast food companies saying, hey, get your milkshakes today, whereas other ones were saying, we're not going to be providing milkshakes because there's a political rally going on and we know you're using this tactic. That tactic was very effective. And so it then migrated to the United States.
Okay.
And we see it happening in the United States as well, happened in Portland. The Portland police put out a report that there was a worry that there was mixing of chemicals actually into the milkshakes. But then you see the media running cover for this by saying, oh, it's okay, it's just milkshakes. There's no problem with that. It's okay that you're resorting to violence. It's funny, this is a joke, we can all laugh about this, without understanding that, look, whether or not there's chemicals in these milkshakes, I hope to God they're not doing that, something like that. But even if they're not, they're using that as a tactic to incapacitate their opponent, to blind them, where then the Reds can strike in with tools, with implements. We saw someone with a crowbar at Portland that was bashing people in the head.
Right.
This is the purpose of the milkshakes. The purpose is to blind you so that the other people can then move in with a second wave attack and come in and commit actual, real physical injury.
Now we know a lot more about Antifa than we did when we first started this video. Next, Jack is going to talk about why we don't hear about Antifa more, why there aren't more stories on these protests and the violence, and how the mainstream media is enabling Antifa and is culpable of aiding and abetting them in committing violence.
And now you've got these media groups that are providing them air cover, and they're also sending out a propaganda campaign against those political opponents in order to get the public at large to start to think that, you know what, maybe it is okay to be intolerant to someone in a red hat supporting President Trump, a red MAGA hat, because, well, this article says that those people are intolerant. This article says that those people are bad, right? And this is the essential difference, that instead of my political opponent just having a difference of opinion with me, it's that my political opponent is bad. Right. And that I must therefore have a reaction to stop the bad thing, rather than say, look, you voted for a different guy for president than me, and they won and we lost, and better luck next time, which is kind of how it used to be in politics. Now it's, we must stop the other, we must stop the enemy. And it's tribalistic, it's in-group, it goes back to some very, very primal, very medieval, very barbaric kind of cultures that a lot of human civilization has been moving away from. But these groups, and a lot of the organizers of these groups, they're doing it quite deliberately, are tapping into some of these baser instincts in order to further their own ends.
In my opinion, it's not just the mainstream media that is biased towards Antifa and against conservatives. Take a look at the way the local coverage in Tacoma depicted what happened, and how they very quickly moved from talking about the crime that was committed, the attack that was committed, and what the protesters are trying to accomplish.
I want to show you what's going on right now while I tell you what we've just learned about this suspect. The Pierce County Medical Examiner has identified him as 69-year-old Willem Van Spronsen of Vashon Island. He has a criminal history that included assault on a police officer and violating a no-contact order for domestic violence. This evening, officers are serving warrants at his home on Vashon Island to collect evidence in this case. Now, there was a protest event outside here last night, and another was supposed to happen this afternoon. A few people who gathered out here believe he may have been at last night's event, but they're not sure why he would have come back here early this morning with a weapon.
Shut down!
Aye.
Shut down!
Aye.
Shut it down!
Shut it down!
It was not the event they had planned for this day. Police tape kept crowds away from the Northwest Detention Center and plans to protest the ICE sweeps that the Trump administration is planning for this weekend. On the opposite side of the tape down the road, Tacoma police and federal investigators tried to sort out the violence that played out here in the early morning hours. Investigators say it started with a 911 call because someone was throwing devices over the fence to try and start a fire. When police arrived, they saw a man with a rifle and said he was carrying a satchel.
We don't know, if he just was trying to set a trap, for officers, if he was trying to hurt people in the building.
A car in the parking lot was torched, and investigators say the suspect threw flares at a propane tank, trying to make it explode. Ultimately, 4 officers opened fire, killing the man.
I don't know if you found the terminology used in that clip to be interesting. The commentator said that the man was throwing devices over the fence, trying to start a fire. Devices, as opposed to what we later found out were Molotov cocktails and lit road flares. Now let's move back to the mainstream media. Here's a clip from a recent Matt Christensen show that really explains his perspective on what he saw in terms of coverage of this event, the morning after and the day after it happened.
Beyond the violent attack itself, the most frustrating thing about this story is the collective media shrug in response to it, the collective media failure to apply the same scrutiny they assuredly would if this story came with a more convenient political narrative. The quietest terrorist attack comes with the loudest double standards, the first of which is the overall media silence reporting it. On the Sunday stream, I was wondering, when I turn on the news in the morning, will I even hear this story mentioned? And predictably, the answer was no. Not a single word about this story in NBC's entire 2 hours of morning news coverage. The same goes for CBS. The same goes for Tuesday morning as well. There's no time for such silliness when Trump tweeted something mean again and internet memes about Area 51 are all the rage.
The tongue-in-cheek invite also says, if we Naruto run, we can move faster than their bullets, a reference to the running style of a fictional ninja. The Facebook page is filled with satirical memes about Area 51, but the government isn't laughing.
If joking about storming a federal facility is a worthy story, why isn't seriously advocating it? Why isn't actually doing it? Armed, no less. A worthy story. In fact, the only major network to give any coverage to this story was ABC, with about 15 seconds worth in a broader story about ICE protests on Sunday's Good Morning America.
Following protests at a Tacoma migrant detention center, police shot and killed a man armed with a rifle. Officers say he tried to use devices to set fire to the building and cars.
I don't know what his motivation was or why anyone would try to set a concrete building on fire.
Motive unknown. It's all a mystery. Move along, folks. There's nothing to see here. That may have been accurate on Sunday morning, but since then, plenty of motivational information has emerged. You would think an update to the story to clarify that mystery would be helpful.
Once again, we hear the term device rather than Molotov cocktail or lit road flare, which I just find bizarre. It's so transparent that they're trying to play this down. Now let's shift gears to CNN specifically and what they're doing to aid and abet Antifa, in my opinion. First, let's get a little bit from Matt, and then we'll roll right into a piece from Tucker Carlson.
I guess I shouldn't say every network ignored this story. I have to credit CNN, who gave it a mention too. A few months ago, praising this terrorist's John Brown gun club as the good guys.
That's right. This guy's a good guy? Well, wait a minute. That Wu-Tang hat is a good sign. I'm heading to meet the Seattle area chapter called the Puget Sound John Brown Gun Club.
Yep, there's your good guy terrorist right there, or at least I'm fairly sure that's him. Another shot from the trailer for this episode is confirmed to include Van Spronson, as reported by Andy No. The host of this particular CNN show, W. Kamau Bell, also urged his following to do what you can to support this group, and that tweet is still up presently.
Antifa is a domestic terror group. They commit violence for political ends. But to CNN, they're heroes. Watch two of CNN's primetime hosts explain that Antifa is actually on the right side of history. Watch this.
It says it right in the name, Antifa, anti-fascism, which is what they were there fighting. Listen, there's, no organization is perfect. There was some violence. No one condones the violence, but there were different reasons for Antifa and for these neo-Nazis to be there. One, racist fascists. The other group fighting racist fascists. There's a distinction there.
What brought Antifa did not go there to fight against hate.
Oh, so Antifa's job is to fight against hate. Imagine saying something like that. I mean, not only is it just pure 200 proof propaganda, it's an utter lie and everyone knows it. It's also idiotic. To fight against hate, says the guy who went to Yale. Okay. Well, if you think that's craven, check out the show United Shades of America. It's hosted by a professional hater called W. Kamau Bell. Kamau Bell. K-A-M-A-U. No clue on the pronunciation. Mr. Bell. Just 2 months ago, Bell openly promoted the Puget Sound John Brown Gun Club. That's the violent Antifa group that the Washington State gunman Van Spronson belonged to. And CNN promoted it. Watch this.
I love that these are...
I know. I like that. They're
Can I put it on time on? I want to ask. You want to ask? Wow. And this is a...
I usually have a couple of those on me just in case.
Just in case.
I use it for whatever I need to use it for.
Point taken.
It's hard to believe that's real footage. That aired on CNN. That was a CNN anchor. Oh, I love these, he said, as he handles Antifa's weapons. Could CNN be any more explicit about promoting violence? And I know that there's this rivalry between the channels, and we accuse them of being left-wing, and they say we're right-wing and tools of Trump. Okay, fine, I get it. But that guy works for CNN, and he's holding a knife and brass knuckles and saying, oh, I love this. They're literally promoting violence. And worse than that, after that show aired, the clip we just showed you, That Bell guy encouraged people to donate money to the terror group. He used CNN to do this. He tweeted this, quote, "Are you watching the United Shades episode about the Puget Sound John Brown Gun Club and the good work they are doing to actively end white supremacy by violence? Just understand that being on my show is bringing a lot more harassment their way. Do what you can to support them." He's literally raising money. CNN is raising money for Antifa. Keep in mind that the viewers who took that advice, who followed CNN's guidance and sent money to Antifa, helped fund Saturday's terror attack. Not that CNN cares. In the words of Don Lemon, the gunmen were just fighting racist fascists. Okay.
The mainstream media despises when they're called fake news. They despise being called fake news. Yet they promulgate this hatred, this violence. They aid and abet by essentially giving them free advertising and putting them in a very, very flattering light as opposed to calling them what they are, which are violent. They're violent, anarchistic fascists. While their name says anti-fascist, they're really fascists. And this gets back to the Alinsky rules and essentially calling your enemy or your competitor what you really are to put people off your trail. And I fear that the 90% of people who are either disengaged, don't care, or are watching mainstream media are buying this garbage. As always, I'd be interested in what you have to say about this topic in the comments section below. I'd also love you to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you get notifications when I release new videos. I'm going to say goodbye. This is Mark Paquita with MPTV, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching and for listening.